So if you have any issues with that, please let me know. We are so excited to have AT&T back with us again. This is the third presentation in a series of 3 for this semester, and they have been great. And so we'd like to welcome Ms. LaVon Wilson, who has been such an advocate for CAU and has brought us so many amazing speakers. I will turn the time over to her.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you. We're almost done with the semester. I know y'all are ready, but we just wanted to leave out with one more dynamic speaker for this semester. He's Jeff Ezell. He's a VP of strategy at AT&T. He's my mentor. He's awesome. He's got a lot of experience with the company and its strategy and in general. So hope you're ready with your questions. Please feel free to ask. This can be interactive. You can wait till the end, what have you, but Jeff is ready. He's prepared some great stuff for you guys. So please enjoy. Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, LaVon, and it's a real pleasure to be here and nice to meet everyone virtually. We were saying just a minute ago, I'm actually based in Atlanta, so for those of you that are in Atlanta, whenever things are back to normal, maybe we can have a follow-up meeting that's not digital or remote. I know everybody's getting tired of doing all of this stuff via Zoom, but it really is my pleasure to be here, and hopefully this will be an interactive discussion and one that everyone will enjoy, and hopefully I won't disappoint LaVon. That was kind of a setup. When anyone introduces you as awesome, you've got a kind of high bar to hit. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. Well, if you can all see my screen, I'll just do a quick introduction of my background, and then I prepared some material that hopefully will be, as I said before, more of a two-way discussion to give you a sense of some of the types of projects and the type of work that my strategy team does for AT&T. But just as a thumbnail of my background, I've got over 25 years in the technology and consulting industries. I started out initially with IBM out of college as a systems engineer, and then from there went to business school, and that was really the first time I had even been introduced or exposed to management consulting as a profession. And so I went from business school to the Boston Consulting Group in Boston, and then came down to Atlanta in 1995, I guess it was, or maybe 96. It was right before the Olympics, and helped BCG open our Atlanta office. And then from there, really kind of tired of doing consulting and all the travel that was involved with it, and really wanted to get focused on a technology related profession. And that led me to Bell South at the time, and then from Bell South into AT&T and my current capacity. So that's kind of who I am and how I got to where I am. In terms of the type of work that my team does, it is both strategy, which we'll talk primarily about today in terms of the types of strategic questions and issues that we work on and advise AT&T about, but also part of my responsibility is business development. And that's a term that, depending on the company, can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes it just means sales. It's just a fancy word for sales sometimes at companies. In the case of my role at AT&T, it's really around working with other companies, kind of third-party partnerships that allow AT&T to either access capabilities that we don't have internally, or go to market with another company that's got their own kind of distinctive position in the marketplace that we think could complement AT&T. And it really fits hand in glove with the strategy work that sometimes we'll identify an opportunity. AT&T may not have all the requisite assets to really go be successful with it, and that'll lead us to identify companies and partners that we could approach the opportunity together with. So let me pause there. See if there are any comments or questions before we're going to dig into Strategy 101. All right. Well, the first question I posed here is, what is strategy? And at least within AT&T, there's two big buckets for how I would describe and differentiate different types of strategy. At the corporate level, it's really the big picture questions. Is, what businesses do we as a company want to be in, and that kind of gets to the questions of your portfolio of assets. What businesses are we in today? Which businesses might we want to enter? And then there's also the question of divestiture. Are there older parts of our corporate portfolio that are no longer strategic or important, and therefore might be candidates to divest? So that's the first kind of question: what business or businesses are you in? And then the next is, okay, if I'm going to be in that line of business, what capabilities do I have to be successful in that line of business? And then finally, what's going to be, in this case, AT&T's source of advantage versus the other people that are in those lines of business. And I can use a real tangible example to kind of give you the way you can walk down all those questions in a real example from a few years ago with AT&T, where obviously AT&T historically has been in the telecommunications business. But we've gone through various technology cycles there where, went from Bell South, where I started, being a local exchange provider, wanting to get into long distance, and then getting into the internet as the internet and data connectivity became a bigger deal, and then ultimately into wireless. All of those were evolutions within our core communications business. But a few years ago, when we were looking at just the landscape of the communications business, the growth was really slowing. Certainly the wireline business, the old historical home phone and long distance, that's been long gone or absorbed into other parts of the business. But even with wireless, wireless is reaching saturation to where there's a ton of wireless usage, but there's not a lot of new wireless subscribers to grow the business. So as you're looking around at a corporate level, where's the next growth horizon? That starts to lead you into, do I need to diversify and get into new businesses? And the first one of those big bets that we made a few years ago was AT&T's decision to acquire DirecTV and to get into the delivery of entertainment as a complement to our communications business. But even there, quickly the cable and satellite business was changing, and everything was going to streaming services. So we kind of quickly followed behind that acquisition, saying, well, it's not enough just to be into video distribution. We need to be actually into video creation and more of the content itself rather than just the delivery of the content. And that led to our acquisition of Time Warner, which we now call Warner Media within the AT&T family. And in those instances, it started with, what businesses are we in? What growth do we want to pursue? And then a recognition that we didn't have those capabilities. We needed to go acquire them. And that's why that led to first the acquisition of DirecTV and then of Warner Media. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the big picture corporate strategy questions. Now, I have been in corporate strategy in the past, but currently I'm in our wireless business at the business unit strategy level, and that's really focused on wireless, and even within that, the consumer market, not the business market. And there, the strategic questions are a little bit different. They're much more down to, okay, what markets do we want to be in? What customer segments do we want to serve? What is going to be our value proposition to those customer segments? And then how do we differentiate ourselves versus other competitors pursuing those same customer segments? So there's similar questions, but I would say they're more down at the level of, operating the business maybe than deciding the business that you're going to be in, which is more of the corporate strategy questions. Does that make sense? Any questions? All right, well then, I only have one more slide before getting into hopefully what will be an interactive exercise and doing some real-time strategy work together. But the last slide before doing that is just at a high level, I'll talk about, well, how do we go about doing this? And there's various tools and techniques, many of which I'm sure studied It's been a long time since I was in my MBA program, so I'm sure there's much better tools and things that you're studying than I did 25 plus years ago. But a lot of it's the same types of analysis. You need to understand the industry. And one of the things that we typically do is we'll do a value chain analysis of the industry, where you really kind of look from whatever the product or service is, from the production of it to the distribution to customers to the actual consumption of the product by the end user. Who are all the players involved to get that product to market, and most importantly, who makes what money along the way? Where is the value created across the value chain, and where is the value captured across the value chain? And that allows us to look at a new business opportunity and say, one, where would we fit within that value chain? And do we think that there's enough money to be made in that part of the value chain to be successful? And that back to my example of the video business, that value chain has changed dramatically over the last several years, to where there used to be a large amount of value captured by the companies that distributed the video, whether that be a Comcast or an AT&T or a DirecTV. But now with technology and streaming, most of the value is getting captured not in the distribution of the entertainment, but the actual creation of the entertainment asset. So that gives you an example of how that value chain helps you understand, where the money is made. As they always say, follow the money, right? So that's something we do frequently as part of our work, and we'll talk about that in the example I give in a second. Then, of course, you have to do competitive analysis, understanding, how you stack up capability and asset-wise versus your main competitors. Oftentimes, a big part of that is understanding your relative cost structure, because ultimately, the company that has the best cost structure has oftentimes the best position. At least they have the most market flexibility. They can either take advantage of that lower cost structure to be more profitable and then take those profits and plow them back into the business, or they can take advantage of a better cost structure to lower the price and make it difficult for other people that are higher cost to compete with them. So cost structure is oftentimes a key part of our competitive analysis and our decisions of how to compete. And ultimately, there's so much uncertainty around anything forward looking and strategy that we don't pretend to have a crystal ball. Oftentimes we're having to develop our plans in the context of uncertainty, and therefore we'll do scenario planning and game theory to play out, what set of actions or strategies would be most robust under different outcomes. I mean, sometimes you can have a great strategy, but it's only going to work if one set of conditions fall into place, and could actually be a terrible strategy if the market evolves a different way. So many times you have to figure out what's going to be the most robust and resilient strategy under different uncertain outcomes. And then, as I was saying earlier about the business unit strategy being grounded on what customer segments are you going to serve with what proposition, the best way to do that is really primary market research, is to constantly be researching directly with customers to understand their preferences, their reasons they choose to buy, what they buy, from who they buy from. And so we'll do that many times in conjunction with our own internal market research groups, sometimes with outside market research firms, where it can be as simple as doing surveys to get a quick sense of the pulse of customer sentiment, or it can be much more rigorous in terms of conjoint analyses, where you really have the advanced statistics behind how people respond to different choices that they're presented with about buying this set of, buying a product with this set of attributes versus another product with another set of attributes. You can construct those decisions to where the way people respond to that, you can tease out what is most important to them and how much do they value it, and then put that into our plans of how we bring new products to market. So those are, that's just meant to be a quick view of some of the types of tools and analyses that we do in my strategy team. So now is the part where everybody else gets to talk, because I'm gonna put, when I was in business school, it was called being cold called. I don't know any of you to actually cold call you, but I'll ask people to volunteer. But the question I'm going to pose, and this is
Can I ask a
one that my
question?
team.
Can I ask a question before you do that?
Yeah, certainly.
Because you mentioned the conjoint analysis. And so once in a while, I'll hear someone mention that every 6 months or so. We don't teach that necessarily in academia. Would you find value in that? You know, adding that to right in terms of an analytical topic?
I would. Now, again, my team, and I'll admit, I am not an expert on conjoint analysis either, and Levon may be able to supplement what I say here, because it is one of those kind of applied sciences. I would describe it as. It is ultimately another form of marketing analytics and data analysis that Levon and her team does, as well as our research team. But I do think it's quite valuable because increasingly, one, I see companies doing more and more primary research because everybody wants to be focused on the customer and getting that direct customer feedback to inform our decisions. And the beauty of the conjoint analysis is, surveys tend to be more qualitative. Yes, you get a sense of customer interest, but as I was describing, and I don't understand all the statistics and math underneath the conjoint, but it really does give you an analytical tool to say that even though a customer may not have expressly told you this is why they're picking this thing, by presenting all these different variables, you can isolate what they find most important in how they make their selections when presented with choices to make in the conjoint analysis. And then that gives you kind of the first layer of insight of, oh, this is why they are making that choice. Maybe they wouldn't even have expressed it if you had just asked them it directly. But then the research firms that we work with will allow us to do simulations on that, where then not only do we have the actual results, but we can do what if analysis. We can say, well, let's simulate if, and I'll give you an example. This is one that we're in fact doing right now, is we're trying to understand within AT&T's different wireless brands. We have not only the AT&T service, but we have Cricket Wireless. Don't know if all of you know that Cricket Wireless is part of the AT&T family, but it is. And we're always trying to better understand, well, what customer segments is Cricket Wireless serving versus which segments is AT&T Wireless serving, and why. And then if we were to make adjustments to our offers, what would it do? Would if we made an offer to Cricket, would it just pull from AT&T customers to where we ultimately didn't get a new customer? We just migrated someone from AT&T to Cricket, versus a different set of combinations of offers might pull someone from T-Mobile or Metro or Boost. And so a conjoint and the simulations that you can do out of it helps us tweak and run scenarios to say, okay, well, if I do this, I'm more likely to attract a customer to switch from T-Mobile to Cricket versus just migrating from AT&T to Cricket. So yes, I think it would be very valuable.
Okay, appreciate that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, feel free, jump in and pepper me with questions throughout. So here's the question we were posed a couple of years ago, which at its highest level, it's, is gaming a good opportunity for AT&T? AT&T is not really in the gaming marketplace today, other than there are parts of Warner Media that do produce games. But the time we were posed this question was before we had acquired Warner Media, so it was more from a communications perspective. Should AT&T look at playing a role in the gaming industry? So let me just pause there and open it up to the group of, how would you go about answering this question? I mean, what would be some of the questions that would be in your mind, or what would be some of the analyses or data that you would try to get to answer this question for AT&T?
I think for me, hi, how are you? Thanks for joining us. I'm Cheryl Jester George, the Director of the MBA and Graduate Programs. First of all, when I see the word gaming, I'm assuming it's like video games and things like that, right?
Yes.
And so because what I know about AT&T as a customer, my phone and my wire, my TV, internet, and things and like that work through you. My first question would be how saturated is this industry? And because you are not, this is not your background, what would be some of the things we would need to review to make sure that we would be competitive in this market, just based on what I know about AT&T and the things that I know about gaming is that it is captivating. I have a nephew that we have to turn off his TV and make him run outside. So those would be my questions about gaming. This is not an industry that I'm familiar with, AT&T being involved in. So what data and how will we analyze that to determine whether or not we will be competitive in this particular market?
Great question, Cheryl. And you're right. Just because there's an industry out there that, or a service out there that there's demand for, doesn't mean that we as AT&T are well equipped to go serve it. So you're absolutely right. That would be part of the analysis. Any other folks?
Steve, yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jasper.
Okay. As somebody who is an avid gamer myself, and knows that this is an industry that is ultimately just going to continue to grow. It's not going to go anywhere. I think that it'd be in the similar strategic thinking with you pairing with Warner Media. I think it would be a great opportunity, for AT&T to break into gaming. I know that one of the top games in the world right now is Fortnite, and they just had a lawsuit with Google and Apple because they had an actual app, a Fortnite app on the iPhone, and they were having troubles with monetizing and like who gets the money, da 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 da. But ultimately, right, that is another way that they can diversify, your profile and get into an industry that does make a lot of money, that will continue to make a lot of money, and bring in, I think, some of the younger generations as well. As somebody who is Gen X, but like my brothers are millennials, Facebook is the same age as I am. So, like these things are kind of new. And we normally tend to gravitate towards what our parents, use. I use what my parents use, but if it's something that like the kids are introduced to, if it's something that young adults are introduced to, and I know lots of full-grown adults that play video games. Another marketing strategy, another way to get into an industry and just kind of like showcase yourself and the things that the quality of your product and things like that.
Yeah, Jasper, those are some great points that you brought up there. I'll touch briefly on a couple of them. One, what you're pointing to is just the inherent growth in the category, right? To your point, gaming has been a very high growth industry, and I'll actually comment on that in a second with some data. So that's a lot of times where you start is, is it a growing opportunity and is there a lot of customer demand? And you're right, it absolutely meets that criteria. A couple of other things that you pointed out importantly is that if you think back to the point about Warner Media, yes, as AT&T now has some of those entertainment assets, we've got more capability and maybe a right to participate here versus we would have historically. But this is one of the interesting things of how we first got looking at gaming. It was not just gaming for the sake of gaming, but you have to look at what's the broader set of substitutes for any product, right? And if you look at entertainment as a broad category, entertainment gaming is a big part of entertainment, and it's actually substituting a lot of traditional entertainment. So, and it sounds like as a gamer, you know this, but people increasingly, rather than watching direct TV, you know, the cable or satellite, will be watching Twitch and watching other people game, or they'll be on YouTube watching people game. And so in some respects, aside even from just the growth opportunity, there's a defensive play, which is like, look, I've got this huge entertainment business, and over time, is that set of entertainment assets appealing to new customers? And if I don't have, you know, entertainment products that are appealing to the new customers, I'm just going to age out and decline as my older customers that I'm serving, you know, become less and less a part of the market. So that's a huge part of it as well. Is you need to look at it not only from the opportunity side, but is it starting to substitute for the products that you already sell? So great points, and as well as the one of it may allow AT&T to appeal to a different, you know, different age group, different set of customers. So all great points. Anyone else?
Hey, Jeff, I just wanted to mention really quickly, since you mentioned Twitch, when you're talking about appealing to a different age group of customers, not only is it the young adults who play games, but it's also kind of the parents of the young adults like me who watch my son's basketball game stream on Twitch, right? So that's even more.
Absolutely. Anyone else? All right, well, there'll be more opportunities.
Yeah, there's a couple quick comments.
Yes, go ahead.
And it's kind of what people were saying earlier. And Paul Brown, I'm a chair for decision science and economics. That customer in gaming, they are so addicted to that. Like the amount of time that they spend on that is, I don't even want to know. Right? Because my kids play it, right? Another part too is like, when I think you were saying this earlier, they don't, my kids don't look at TV. They don't watch TV. They watch YouTube. I'm like, YouTube? What do you mean you watch YouTube? What? Huh? Yeah, we don't watch. Yeah, I don't need a TV for like direct TV to watch. Yeah, so yeah, so but yeah, so it's interesting too then, right? So yeah, so it's funny. I did not know AT&T was looking at that. I don't know if you're in that, but then like you said too, with that new business, and I'm curious how that new business is fitting into AT&T. I would take it, Time Warner. I would take it that's going well too then, right?
Well,
with something else, right?
Well, it's still early. I mean, it's only been probably a couple of years that AT&T has owned Time Warner, and that business is transforming itself. You know, it's moving more to this direct to consumer model, like a Netflix, where you know, we've created HBO Max, which is now our equivalent, where we sell that directly to consumers. It's a subscription versus distributing it through, you know, a cable provider. And that's really kind of where that whole streaming business is going, whether it's YouTube or whether it's Netflix or Disney Plus. This gets back to the value chain analysis, is all the creators of content are trying to figure out how to cut out the distributor and the cut that the distributor makes on that and go direct to consumer. So you know, our bet on Warner Media is a long-term bet. It's a long-term bet that as I was saying earlier, as our wireless business gets completely saturated, where 100% of people have a wireless device, increasingly what we see them doing on their wireless device is consuming, you know, content, streaming video being the biggest kind of source of traffic on our wireless network. And therefore, we, as a longer term bet, wanted to be able to participate in both of those, not only providing the wireless service to carry the video, but also own video assets directly, so that, you know, if you're a Verizon wireless customer watching HBO, we're still making money on that. So that's kind of part of the broader diversification back to the corporate portfolio view of AT&T. So all great. I'm sorry, was someone else?
I just had a question for you. So a person like me who knows very little about gaming, and this is a proposition that the company's going to, would I be someone that you would discount, or how would you draw me in to this market?
Well, let me try to answer this on the next chart, which may or may not completely answer it, Cheryl. So if I don't, come back and make sure I do. But what I wanted to show, just to kind of take you through the way we thought through the process and broke down the question, is the first thing, and it's similar to what Jasper was saying, is that we start with how big is this market, and not only how big is it, but is it growing? Certainly, we've got a lot of big businesses today at AT&T that are more legacy businesses that are not growing very quickly, and we need to find big businesses that are growing if we're going to move the needle for AT&T. But then partially going to where your question is going is that, you can look at the data here. It is a very big industry, $180 billion globally this year. So it's big. And then the question of, is it growing? That's where, if you look on the left, you can see it depends on what part of the business you look at. Look at the traditional PC gaming. There's some growth there, but it's low growth, about 1% CAGR there over the last 4-year period. Console gaming, that's your Xbox or your PlayStation or your Nintendo. That's higher growth at 5%, but still not a super fast growing category. But if you look at mobile, mobile gaming has grown 15% per year over this 4-year period. And so I bring this up to point out, well, one, this is a pretty classic starting point, is look at the addressable market, look at its size, look at its growth characteristics, and then try to decompose it into this different segments within that business. Now, to your question about mobile, here's the interesting thing, is that up until this point, mobile gaming has been more casual gaming, right? This is the games you download from the App Store on your iPhone or your Android device. And a lot of people refer to that as casual gaming, as opposed to what a lot of times the console or PC gaming is referred to as AAA gaming, which is like super intense, highly performance-based, multiplayer online gaming, much more demanding from a actual hardware and software to deliver those games versus the casual game you play on your mobile phone. But I guess, Cheryl, do you play any games on your phone?
Ryan, yes.
Well, and that's why I'm so even though you might not consider yourself a gamer, you are of interest to AT&T because, one, you're a wireless subscriber, and one of the things you do on your phone is play games, and that's actually one of the faster growing parts of the business. So that's another way where you kind of start drilling down into the question of okay, well, is this broadly applicable? And then the right side of this chart is really more just looking at how much of that is in the U.S. as an opportunity versus globally, because we're really just a domestic company. And so of that 180 billion, 32 billion of it's in the U.S. So it's still even just when you look at domestically, a big opportunity. So that's a pretty classic starting point on an analysis my team would do. But this is just a snapshot of where the business has been, right? This is the last 4 years. It doesn't really tell you where the business is going. And you can often make the mistake, and we probably made this mistake, of buying into a business that used to be a good business, but isn't going to be a good business going forward, over the next 5 years. So that's where you have to start looking at trends, both technology trends, consumer behavior trends, and start to predict and do those scenarios I was describing earlier with scenario planning about where do I think this is going? And so what got us interested in gaming, aside from just the size of it, speaks to a little bit on this chart, which is the distinction between the total number of gaming users globally, which you can see this year is around 3.2 billion gamers globally. But that's growing, but not that high, 3% per year. But when you look at cloud gaming, and I'll for those of you who may not that familiar with it, I'll describe it here in a second. It's got a much higher growth profile. It's projected to grow, over the same time period by 94%. Now, some of that's because it's off of a smaller base, but if you can look at just over the last 3 years, we went from 300,000 people doing cloud gaming to over 100 million. So just in a few years, you went from almost nothing to 100 million people doing this globally. And what I mean by cloud gaming is essentially, rather than going out and buying a game, like if you would have historically bought your game for your Xbox as a disc and gone home and put it in your console and played it in your living room. This is the notion that, just like we've seen with almost all other forms of digital entertainment, whether it was first music and now streaming video, things are moving off of the physical media to being just streaming back from the cloud, where you don't have to have the physical software on your device. You don't even have to really have the computational power on your device to do it. I mean, if you think about the current generation of consoles, whether it's Xbox or PlayStation, I mean, those are super expensive, super high performance machines to do all the computational, graphics and rendering that they do. But the promise of cloud gaming is you move all of that back into the network, and you have all the servers and all the computational power in the network. And essentially, you're just like the Twitch example. You're just streaming the game down from the network. You're not playing it locally. Now you're doing your inputs from your controller locally, but really all the heavy work's happening back in the cloud, back in the network. And so if you think about, when you look at this chart, now you're like, wow, well, maybe this is an opportunity for AT&T, because we're a networking company. So we've got the network assets that, as we roll out faster wireless networks and faster home networks with fiber, we're providing the connectivity that's required to be able to play these things that are really happening somewhere back in the network and just streaming down. Not too dissimilar, again, to the notion of streaming media, to where you don't have to have a set-top box anymore to watch Netflix or Hulu or any of these other things. It just streams down from the internet. So this was one of the things we're like, aha, well, maybe this really is a point where big opportunity, growing segment of it that fits with our assets. Does that make sense?
Jeff, I saw that Jasper had his hand up earlier. Jasper, do you still have a question?
Oh, it wasn't a question. It was just a comment. I was just going to say that the first gamer that I ever knew was my grandmother. She would play Bejeweled on the TV. And so like just a thought, I mean, he touched on it, just a thought that like it's a specific age range or a specific type of gaming. Like there's so many different types of gaming out there to even just look at, but he mentioned it. So that's it.
Yeah, no, good point,
Awesome.
Jasper. Anyone else?
And there was one message in the chat from Adriana. What are the network effects of cloud gaming? Well,
and I don't have a slide on this, although we did do an analysis, but it puts a tremendous load on the network. Let me just put it that way, is that this is another reason we're interested in it, is that people are going to do this, right? Whether AT&T participates or not, people are going to play games. They're going to increasingly play those games from the cloud, and we're going to end up being the ones having to carry all that traffic over our network. And it will, probably be hard for us to charge a premium for that, even though arguably the customers save money. I don't have to go buy the new Xbox console, for example. I can just play it from the cloud. So the customer saved $500 or more, but they're not going to necessarily pay AT&T any of that $500 they saved just to play it over our network. So that's why we were thinking, if we're going to end up with the cost of carrying this traffic on our network, we better try to backward integrate into being, a provider of these types of services. So we're making money on that. And actually, I'll jump ahead to a slide that helps illustrate that. And this again is part of back to getting grounded in the economics of the value chain. I'm not going to go through every piece of this, but what we were doing here was trying to understand who makes what money on a video game, whether it's distributed on a physical disc versus if it's downloaded and streamed. So if you look at the top of this, historically, if you went and paid $60 for, you know, the latest Madden title or whatever game is your preference, of that $60, about 30% of it would be captured by the retailer, not only their margin on it, which is about 20% of the $60, but then there's also built-in kind of inventory and price protection that retailers are given to again, manage inventory and margins. But 70% of the profits made by the publisher of the game. So in that case of Madden, that would be Electronic Arts. And, you know, some of that is costs they have to produce the physical disc and package it. Some of it's licensing fees or royalties they have to pay. You know, back in the example of Madden, if you're doing Madden NFL, you got to pay the NFL licensing or royalty rights for that. Then they actually pay a fee to the console itself. So if you're running Madden on an Xbox, the, you know, Electronic Arts has to pay a certain amount to Microsoft to run on the Xbox platform. But then they're left with about a 60% gross margin on that. You move to the cloud, and the first opportunity is they can cut out the distributor altogether, right? I mean, you know, you don't have to go into GameStop or anything else. You can buy it directly from the publisher. So that takes that $18 that previously went into physical distribution and makes it available as a way to grow your profits. And then, you know, there's probably less opportunity, but still some opportunity to remove some of these other costs as well. Certainly the physical disc and packaging costs, but even this console platform fee. If you run this back in the network on just general, general computing platforms, then you may not have to pay that console provider to be running on an Xbox or a PlayStation. So they can expand their margins. And so that may not have been directly your question, but it triggered the thought that, yes, this is also part of the whole strategic analysis, is how is that value chain changing? Who's getting cut out? Who's trying to grow their profitability, and where do we fit into it? So as I was implying earlier, we don't even show up in this right now. I mean, we're a network. Well, in the physical disc model, there is no network other than for your multiplayer gaming. On the download and streaming model, it's going over someone's network, but we're not getting any cut of it. So that was what I was referencing, that we needed to find a way to actually participate in this more than just at the network layer. Good questions. Anyone else? Okay, well, I've only got a couple more slides, but this is back to this value chain. This is just another way to look at it. So we start by trying to figure out, okay, who all is involved? What all companies are involved? What do they do? What assets do they have? And therefore, again, help us try to figure out our potential play here. So what we were showing on the top of this is, if you go from left to right, from the creator of the game to the publisher who aggregates games and then brings them to market through distributors, ultimately getting to the end user, we first broke that down into who are all of these different players. Jasper mentioned earlier Fortnite. I think, I don't see them on here, but Fortnite, the gaming company for them, I don't see their publisher listed, but they're similar to the Activisions and the Ubisofts and the Electronic Arts. But this is where Warner Brothers Games is a publisher of games. We talked about the retailers and the risk there, that some of these traditional ways these games were distributed, whether it was physical retail like GameStop or whether it was online like Steam, that's another role in this value chain. And then we talked about before, people today, would buy a platform, whether it be a console or a PC, but then to play these games, that platform would have a GPU is a graphics processing unit, but this is a high-end microprocessor in the console or the PC from companies like NVIDIA or Intel or AMD. And then ultimately the screen that they're consuming this on could be either TV, PC, or mobile. You might at first say, well, why are you looking at all these, what is NVIDIA and graphics processing have to do with, AT&T's decision whether to play in gaming or not? Well, it kind of gets back to this question of, in the future, that game's got to run somewhere. There's still going to have to be a processor running that game. It just may not be in, a piece of equipment in your house. And if we're going to run it in the network, you may need to have a relationship with a company like NVIDIA to put this processing power into AT&T's network to run the games in AT&T's network and then sell that as a service. And a lot of different companies are trying to do that. If you see what we show here at the bottom, the people that are well positioned to move this to the cloud are the big cloud computing platforms, whether it's Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services. And it's interesting, you can see what each of these companies have done over the last few years is they've actually gone back and they've been acquiring these game engine companies that are the ones that have the developer tools that allow people to create these games. So in a sense, they're on the one end of the value chain of where the game runs. They decided they wanted to backward integrate all the way back to the creation of the game and make sure game developers were using their tools so that they would run best in their environment. So you start to see that these companies, they didn't care about trying to be in the historical part of the value chain of being a retailer or a distributor. They went all the way back to the beginning of the tools that are used to create the games. So again, just a kind of interesting way to look at trends and what does it mean about where you want to play, and then what might be a strategic acquisition to get you into that game. So really, I mean, I've got a couple other slides, but I want to be mindful of the time and leave some time for questions. But I guess what I'll say to wrap all this up is, like a lot of strategic projects, there actually is no right or wrong answer, or at least not one that's right or wrong at the time you have to make the decision. It's typically a few years later, you figure out, once you've made a strategic bet, whether it was right or wrong. And so we're still evaluating this. This is a kind of a very still active discussion within AT&T. So I wish I could give you a postscript to say we made this decision and it's worked out this way, but this is still absolutely an ongoing discussion and debate. And a lot of it gets to some of the questions we were talking about earlier. Is we absolutely see that there's an opportunity here. We think we do have some relevant assets in different parts of the value chain, but there are a lot of pieces that we don't, adequately address. And so that's part of the dilemma of, okay, is this where I want to spend my asset and resources, or would I rather partner with some of the companies that you see here on this chart? So hopefully this was interesting and helpful. I just wanted to make it more of a interactive discussion to give you a sense of the types of things that we look at and how we think about the problems. And you all gave some definitely good feedback, and we're thinking about it the right way. So I commend you for that and appreciate you being active participants. But let me pause there and see if Camilla, if you or Levon have any other comments or thoughts, or if we want to just open it up for Q&A.
I don't. This was fascinating. I feel like I learned so much. I know that a couple of the students were interested in potentially learning about internships, so I will direct them directly to Levon. But we appreciate you being here. This was amazing.
Well, it was my pleasure.
I have one last question.
Sure.
Okay.
So how do you feel, since we're talking about strategic mergers and things like that, how do you feel like the merger with Warner Media has gone in the years of thinking that it was going to be a great decision and then making the decision? And so now, after being merged for however long you've been merged for, how do you feel like it is going?
Well, as I was saying earlier, it's still early. I mean, I don't know that we know the complete answer to that, but we are seeing some, some promising, as they call them, green shoots, to use the analogy of something that you planted and now it's just starting to germinate and grow. But I'll give an example, and Levon, please jump in and comment on this as well, is that one of the things that we did and had the ability to do after we acquired Warner Media is when Warner launched HBO Max last year, we had the opportunity to put that into our, our premium unlimited plans. We call them, our elite unlimited plans come with HBO Max included. So one, it's a great customer benefit, and it gives you access to the service not only on your mobile phone, but you can watch it, on any device that you can download the app to. And so one, this is kind of the synergy of it, is one, that gave Warner Media a huge boost in terms of launching a new service. They were able to immediately tap into millions of our wireless customers to introduce them and expose them to HBO Max and ultimately get them to sign up as subscribers to HBO Max. So it was very good for Warner Media, but it was also very good for the wireless business because it's allowed us to have a differentiated offering with HBO Max, but also causes more people to upgrade to that higher unlimited plan. If they're looking at, choosing one of our more entry or lower unlimited plans, they can look at it and say, oh, well, there's this additional value. I'm saving $15 a month on HBO Max if I take the elite unlimited plan. So it's allowed us to, change our mix of customers to be more higher end plans. Those plans typically have lower churn. So the customers on those plans are more valuable and more profitable at AT&T. So we've gotten benefit on both sides of the business, but that's just one example. But yes, I would say early days, but we are seeing some benefits.
No, that's absolutely it, Jeff. You hit on what I was going to hit on. It's the stickiness of it, the stickiness that it brings, because it's a customer with more products. They're happier with AT&T. They're less likely to leave. It'd be interesting I haven't looked at those numbers, those churn numbers of HBO Max people with wireless, but that would be interesting to look at.
But great question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Somebody else had a question. I'm sorry.
I did have a question. So you say
Go
you
ahead.
can never tell right whether it's.
I'm sorry, we can barely hear you.
Hello, good morning. You said
Okay.
you can never tell right away whether it's a good investment or not. So on average, about how long does it take? How long can you tell? Do you give it 3 years? Do you give it 5 years? What's the average time limit for that?
I did have a hard time hearing, but I think if I'll state it back and see if I got the questions. The question is, how long does it typically take to determine if it was a good investment or you made a return on the investment? It obviously the answer is it depends. On smaller investments, you may know, pretty quickly whether or not you're going to get a return on that investment. Something the size of Warner Media, which I can't remember the exact purchase price, but I want to say it was, 90 billion or approaching $100 billion that we had to pay for Warner Media. Those are investments that pay off over a long period of time. So, we're looking at that probably over the span of, years, if not longer, to know, okay, did that really make sense in terms of not just, it could make sense strategically, it could make sense in terms of giving value to our consumers, but the question of whether it generated a return on assets, was it worth the 90 billion we paid for it? That's going to take a while for the returns to come in because it's a long-term investment. with really kind of long-term returns in mind. So I think we won't know the answer for that for a few more years.
That was a great question.
That was a great question.
These have been great questions today. Like I said, I told you he was awesome. It was awesome. It was just great information, even for me. Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming today. It was just a great session.
Yeah, well, like I said, it was truly my pleasure. I love getting a chance to talk to people outside of the company and also to show off some of our work and also learn from others. So hopefully we can continue to do other sessions like this. I guess this is the last one for this year, it sounds like, but yeah. Look forward to doing it again with a new group of people next year.
Yes, thank you. And this was a great way to close it out. This brings our year to a close for professional development, but we are around. I'll be passing the links on to the internship website again. Please go on, register for the information so that when the internships become available next year, we're ready to hit the ground running. We'll also be sending out some refresher resume writing stuff to you guys too, because really when we get back to school next year, we don't want to miss out on the timelines, right? We want to just really be ready to hit the ground running. So have a great summer. Stay in touch. If you need anything, if you need someone to look at your resume, just let us know. Great questions again. And thanks so much for coming. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you, Ricardo, for all that you've done to help facilitate these sessions. You too, Ms. Cook, and Dr. Jester George is gone. So thank you.
And
thank you, AT&T. We appreciate you.
And I'd like to say thank you from Fort Valley to AT&T, to the team. Thank you all for your efforts. And again, thank you, Camilla, as well, for facilitating.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Y'all take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Have a good summer.
for some
Bye.
great sessions.
No
Thank you.
problem. Thank you. We'll see you. I'll be talking to you soon. All right. Bye.